Hi, I'm Larry Puckett, the DCC Guy. Today on the DCC Guy, I want to go back and take another follow-up look at lubricating diesel locomotives. Specifically, this time I want to talk about the Athearn basic chassis mechanism that has been around in various forms since the early 1950s. So there are literally hundreds of thousands of these locomotives models floating around, and they need lubricating from time to time. So we're going to go over this, and I'll show you how to lubricate the bearings, the universal gears, and the truck gears as well. Now, this doesn't only apply to Athearn locomotives because there are a lot of other models that have been based on the Athearn design. Lifelike, for example, when they did their Proto 2000 series, they based it almost completely on this design, to the point that you could actually swap components from Athearn locomotives into Lifelike locomotives. And of course, when Walthers bought Lifelike, they continued using this design for a while as well. Plus, there are a lot of other brands out there that have based their models, at least in part, on this specific mechanism. So it has a lot of applications. So we'll take a look at that in a minute. Once again, I want to thank those of you who went ahead and subscribed to the site. That was great that you responded, but don't give up on me now. Go ahead, those of you, there's still about, I checked this morning, 46% of the viewers aren't subscribed to the site. So that's almost as many as who are. So please go ahead, click on the subscribe button, and we'll get you signed in. That's all for the introduction. Let me go ahead, get the camera pointed down and focused in on the workbench, and we'll get started. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is bearings. Now, I showed you a little bit about motor bearings and lubricating them the other day in the first video I did on the Atlas locomotives, but let me point something out. All of these locomotive motors just about have a little bronze bearing located here on each end of the motor. And you can see it where the motor shaft goes into the plastic casing. And as I said, just about all motors, DC motors made for model railroading, have these kind of bearings. Also here on the ends of this helical gear on top of the gear tower, there is a similar bearing located right in here, and another one on this side of the gear tower. And there's one on each end, of course, obviously. Another type of bearing to look out for are these here. If you see these little squared off bearings here, those are the same type of bearings as on the motor. These are made out of a material called sintered bronze. Sintering is a process where they take the metal powder and put it in a mold and compress it under heat and pressure, and that fuses it together. And it doesn't melt it though, so it's not a molten, pure, solid material when they're done. It's more of a porous material, sort of like what sandstone is like when it's fused from plain old sand. So the good thing about this is, because of the porous structure, oil can get into the bearings, and it's almost self-oiling after that because the oil can move out and lubricate the surfaces that are rubbing against one another. So there are then several places that you need to concentrate on these bearings, and this is particularly true of these Athearn locomotives where they have these bronze bearings. You noticed on the Atlas locomotive the other day, it did not have them. So these are a very good spot to add a drop of oil. Also again on the motor, and then on each end of the helical gear here on the gear tower. So again, all you have to do for that is just put a little drop of oil right here at each end of the shaft where it comes out of that bearing, and then another drop here at each end of this helical gear. And those are easy enough to get to. Just give a little shot in there, like so. Sorry you can't see this for that support there. But that's really all there is to those. With these, you can just put a little shot down in here, on the axle, between the axle and the bearing itself, and that will move down in there by itself as the locomotive is run. Do not overdo it, because you don't want all this excess oil getting spun down onto your track and adding to that grungy stuff that builds up, as I mentioned in a previous video on cleaning track. Okay, now the other thing that I showed you the other day was using the Hobby Lube lubricant. Now, one way, the easy way to do this on this type of a locomotive is right in here underneath of this. Let me just jump back a second. I'm sorry. Another spot on these locomotives that can use a little bit of lubrication is there's a shaft here that connects through this universal joint, and it moves back and forth to allow the truck to flex. So a little drop of lubricant right there where it goes into that joint will help it operate better too. And there's one down at each end. You can also add some to these little universal ball joints here. Some people don't feel that it's necessary with the modern engineering plastic. However, I do go ahead and lubricate it a little bit. It doesn't hurt for sure, and it can only help, I think. Okay, back to the greasing the gears. I'm sure you probably can't see it, but right here, there is a gear coming out of the truck there, and it's readily available to lubricate. You can just squeeze some lube down in there, and then you can see that white spot that I just lubricated, and then, you know, spin the motor, run it for a little while, and that lube, as you can see, is going to get distributed down through the gears, and it's already probably invisible to you because it's moved a little bit, and then hit it with a little bit more. So that is one way to lubricate that type. Another approach is, like on the Atlas unit, to come in from the bottom, and on the end, on the side of these cover plates, just slip your screwdriver underneath of there and flip it up. And it's going to pop off and probably go flying across the room. But as you can see, just like on the Atlas unit, you can see where some of that lube has already distributed itself down in here. So let me go ahead and give it a shot down in here, and that's all you need. You don't need a ton, but that's down into all those gears, and it's going to be distributed throughout the mechanism as this locomotive is run. So that's a lot simpler than the job that I had to do the other day with that Atlas locomotive. It really goes in a lot easier. And that's really all there is to lubricating these kinds of locomotives. So again, the motor bearings, the universal joints, the bearings on the helical gears here, and the bearings on the axles. And then pop this cover off and shoot some Hobby Lube down in there, and you're good to go. So it only takes a few minutes once you get the locomotive shell off and are ready to do the job. Well, I hope that gives you a better perspective on the types of lubrication that you need to do to these Athearn chassis and various others that are similar to them. So it's fairly straightforward, easy thing to do, but you do need to set up a schedule to check these out, particularly if you're running your locomotives a whole lot. You know, if you only run them once in a blue moon, they probably don't need regular lubrication. But one thing for sure, when you take them out of storage or when you buy one, go ahead, check the lubrication. I've gotten locomotives, not necessarily Athearn, but various other brands that were dry as a bone when they came in. So make sure you check that out on a brand new locomotive. If it's shipped from China, they might not be putting a lot of oil and grease in them to start with. I hope you enjoyed that particular video, and look forward to the next one on lubricating steam locomotive models. Bye.